welcome to Doing DVD, and this is Disney Classics number 49, The Princess and the Frog. Now, unlike the last two, this is one I have at least actually heard of, but aside from that, I don't actually know terribly much about it. I do know that it's a return to a more traditional sort of 2D look on the animation, although I expect it's probably still heavily computer generated, but I don't know that for sure. I'm interested to find out. But when it comes to the story, I don't really know anything. From the title, I'm guessing this has something to do with kissing frogs who would then become princes. And in my mind, that's kind of like one of these big fairy tale tropes, like, you know, sleeping curses and poisoned apples. But I guess that must have some kind of origin in a single particular story somewhere, but I don't know what that is. Is that called The Princess and the Frog, or is this some kind of other twist on the story? Don't know. Which I find surprising how that seems like a key bit of information that's missing from my brain. But I do know that this is the beginning of what they call the Disney Revival era, and that this one, you know, is pretty well regarded, so I have fairly high expectations for this one. Although I'm trying to not let them get too high, because that often leads to disappointment. So without further ado, let's watch this one and find out what it's all about. So it turns out there's a 2002 book called The Frog Princess, which is based on the old Brothers Grimm The Frog Prince, and this is inspired in part by those, and it actually turned out to be pretty good. I'm still really not sure why there seems to be a sort of Frog Prince shaped hole in my memory, but that doesn't really matter given how loosely things are based here. You can definitely see why they call this the start of the Disney Revival, because it seems to like try and bring back basically every successful past element of Disney that they'd had in before. They return to actual traditional 2D animation with actual pencil and paper, full-on musical theatre with the characters themselves doing the actual singing, which I'm not sure has happened since Mulan. Every other song we've had then has been a sort of abstract narration style instead, and we've got fairy tales and princesses and magic and things, although with a more modern twist, which actually makes it quite enjoyable, I found. Because, you know, most of the traditional fairy tales, they're all sort of happened a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away kind of thing. Whereas this one being transplanted into 1920s New Orleans, it gives it a sort of different feel and gives it a more unique feeling. You know, it's sort of fresh and feels more modern, even though the 1920s isn't even close to modern. Everything's there from your traditional fairy tale, but with a sort of more modern twist on it. You've still got your Magic Kingdom, it's just this one happens to be the city of New Orleans, and rather than a king, you've got a big rich landowner. You still got a magical villain, but this time with it being New Orleans, it's a, you know, voodoo shadow man. And so it feels like it's only taking all these classic Disney tropes and just giving them a fresh new coat of paint. They were all by directors Ron Clements and John Musker, whose previous credits include things like Aladdin and The Little Mermaid. Apparently they almost tried to bring back composer Alan Menken, who had also worked on those films, but instead ended up going with Randy Newman, who'd recently been working with Pixar. You know, it feels like they're purposely trying to bring back everything that had made Disney great in the past, which, you know, has the potential to go horribly wrong. Reunions aren't always what they're cracked up to be. But in this case, it seems to have turned out rather well. There's enough different and new people involved as well that stops it being like an old guy's greatest hits tour. And because they rehired all the superstar 2D animators that they had in the past, they've basically got the best of group for drawing this film. And it turns out to look fantastic. Now obviously they're still using caps and scanning all these hand drawings and doing the colouring digitally, which is then augmented with other 3D effects, which is the same as they've been doing since the 90s, so it's still classic enough. But the overall look of it is lovely. The voice acting's all good. I particularly enjoyed Keith David as the Shadow Man. He's the only really name that I personally find recognisable. Obviously I'm well aware of who Oprah Winfrey is, but I'm much less familiar with her voice. Because, you know, while I know stuff about her, I've never actually really watched anything with her in it. As opposed to Keith David, who I've seen and heard in many things. I particularly enjoyed his solo song, Friends from the Other Side. Story-wise, again, you know, it's pretty traditional Disney fairy tale stuff about, you know, finding true love above, basically. But it does it well and it's fun with interesting characters. And manages to make you feel sad for the comic relief Firefly. It is a little bit sad watching the special features, hearing everyone herald the return of hand-drawn animation. John Lasseter saying that if there's one company that should still be doing hand-drawn films, it should be Disney. But from the future we now know that that hasn't happened since. It's just too time-consuming and expensive compared to computer graphics. And so overall, while maybe not quite at the same height as the Disney Renaissance, it's definitely a really good return to form. What are your thoughts on The Princess and the Frog? Tell me about those in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again next week with Tangled.